They called me low end, like it was a category, like it was stamped on my forehead. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't do the whole, let me speak to your manager routine. I smiled, small, polite, like a guy signing a receipt he already knows is fake, because I wasn't there to win a conversation. I was there to read the room and decide how much of it I'd own later. I run businesses up and down the coast, restaurants, bars, a small resort, a taxi company, cleaning crews, private security. Nothing glamorous, nothing loud. I dress plain on purpose. I keep my watch turned inward. I park far. I let people assume I'm self-made because it's easier when they underestimate you. That day, none of it mattered. Not the businesses, not the money, not the reputation. Only one thing mattered: my employee's surgery bill and the way an insurance company tried to file her pain under "not our problem." Her name was Marissa. Quiet, sharp, the kind of manager who solved problems before you knew they existed. She started as front of house years ago, then climbed, shift lead, assistant manager, then the person everyone trusted when the place was on fire. If you've ever owned a business, you know what that means. Your best people don't demand loyalty, they earn it. I paid well. I did benefits better than, well, full medical, dental, vision, retirement match, and 30 days off, more than required. Not because I'm a saint, because good staff is the backbone, and I don't like rebuilding spines. Marissa never abused it, not once. That's what made the next part feel like a mugging. It started with her asking for time off. She tried to play it casual, like she was requesting a long weekend, but her hands were shaking and her smile kept slipping. "Everything okay?" I asked. She hesitated, then said it. Hysterectomy. Necessary, not optional. The kind of thing you schedule because you have to, not because you want to. She'd already done the doctor visits. The hospital ran the insurance. She was told it should be covered. So she asked for regular PTO, trying not to be a burden. That's when I cut her off. "No," I said. "You're not burning vacation days for surgery." I denied her PTO request on purpose, so HR could put her on unlimited sick leave with full pay. She blinked at me like she didn't know kindness could be structured. The surgery happened. Recovery was rough, but she kept texting updates like she was reporting for duty. Day 3, walking a little. Day 5, pain's down. Day 7, I'm bored. I miss work. That last one made me laugh, then made me angry, because a person shouldn't miss work while they're healing from something like that. Then the bill hit. Not a small bill, a change-your-life bill. Marissa called me from her apartment, voice thin. They said insurance isn't paying. I thought it was a paperwork delay, a coding error, something boring. It wasn't boring. The denial letter read like someone hiding behind a dictionary. Out of scope, policy revision, not covered. And the part that made my jaw lock: retroactive. I called the insurance rep first. Polite, calm, one question at a time. She gave me the corporate lullaby. "We understand your concerns. We're reviewing. It's a complex claim." I said, "Complex how?" She finally admitted it. The company updated the policy and removed hysterectomy coverage. "But the surgery was 5 months ago," I said. "Yes, but the change is retroactive up to 12 months. I paused. "So you changed the rules after the game ended?" She didn't answer that. She just repeated the script like she was pushing a button that dispensed excuses. Then she said the quiet part out loud. "Not all clients were notified. Typically, large accounts are prioritized for notices, meaning, if you're small, you find out when you bleed." I told her, "Put your supervisor on." Marissa didn't hear that phone call. I didn't tell her, not yet, because she was still recovering and I wasn't about to drop corporate cruelty on her like a second surgery. Instead, I booked a flight, 2 hours in the air to their headquarters. It wasn't dramatic, no entourage, no threats, just me, a carry-on, and the denial letter folded like a warrant. On the plane, I stared at the clouds and thought about my family. I'm the so-called black sheep, the one who didn't follow the polished path. But even black sheep come from expensive wool, allowances, a small inheritance from my grandmother, a trust set up when I was a baby, investments I made early, money my relatives gave me so I wouldn't embarrass the name. I built my businesses with sweat, sure, but my launch pad was a silver spoon I didn't ask for and learned to hide. Their headquarters was glass and marble, the kind of lobby that tries to intimidate you with clean air. I checked in, got a visitor badge like I was a school kid, then sat, quiet, until they were forced to acknowledge me. They finally brought me into a conference room that smelled like coffee and superiority. A vice president walked in, expensive suit, tired eyes, practiced smile. He didn't ask about Marissa, not once. He asked, "What's the issue?" like a bill was a typo. So I laid it out. Surgery, approval, denial, retroactive policy change, no notice. He leaned back and said, "We're a large organization. We can't debate every interpretation." I said, "You're not debating. You're refusing to pay." He shrugged, actually shrugged, and said, "Your account isn't significant enough to warrant special handling." There it was again, low end. And suddenly, I wasn't calm anymore. I was focused. I could have yelled. I could have threatened lawsuits. But I've learned something about arrogant people. They want you emotional. It makes them feel taller. So I did something else. I asked questions. Slow, careful, like I was taking measurements. "Confirm for me," I said, "that you changed policy coverage 1 month ago." He nodded. "And you're applying that change retroactively 12 months. He nodded again, like it was normal. "And you didn't notify smaller accounts because you only prioritized large ones." He smiled like I'd finally understood the rules of their little kingdom. Then he said the line that made my skin go cold. "If you can't afford the risk, you shouldn't be in business." I stared at him, then stood up. "Thank you," I said. "That's all I needed." He blinked. "That's it?" I said, "Yeah, that's it." Because now I had something better than anger. I had proof of intent. Back home, I didn't go to my office first. I went straight to Marissa. She looked smaller in her doorway, wrapped in a hoodie, trying to pretend she wasn't scared. She started apologizing the second she saw me. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know they'd do this. I can set up payments." I held up my hand. "Stop. This isn't your fault." Then I told her what mattered. "Your job is to heal. That's it." Her eyes watered instantly, like her body had been holding tears back until it heard permission. I asked for the bill. I asked for the denial letter. I asked for every email. She tried to joke, "You're acting like a detective." I didn't joke back. I said, "I'm acting like your employer." And then, quietly, I paid the entire bill. Right there, one click. Marissa covered her mouth like she might throw up. "I'll pay you back," she whispered. I said, "No, you'll come back alive." That night, Marissa emailed me 3 separate repayment plans, like she was negotiating a mortgage. She was stubborn, not entitled, stubborn, the good kind. I called her and said, "You want to repay me? Fine. Do it by staying employed and getting healthy." Silence on the line, then a shaky breath. "You didn't have to do that," she said. I replied, "I know, that's why I did." After I hung up, I stared at my office wall where my business licenses hung, framed like trophies. All those years building, all those systems, all that compliance. And one insurance company decided my staff was disposable. That's when I opened my contact list and scrolled past the usual names, past vendors, past bankers, past city inspectors, to the people who didn't owe me anything, but would pick up the phone because of my last name, my family's network, and the favors we never cash out unless we have to. I didn't want to win. I wanted to teach them what low end actually meant. Step 1 wasn't revenge. Step 1 was protection. I called 3 insurance brokers the next morning. I asked one question: who covers what they promise? By noon, I had proposals from better companies, more expensive, yes, but with real coverage. Mental health, physical therapy, disability support equipment. The things people pretend don't matter until they do. I chose one, Harbor Shield. Clean reputation, solid service, not cheap. Then I did something Marissa would have hated. I called a full staff meeting. Not dramatic, no speeches, just facts. Our insurance failed one of us, I told them, so we're switching. The room went dead quiet, like everyone was waiting to hear the catch. There is no catch, I said. You're covered, period. Marissa wasn't even back yet, and her story already changed the rules for everyone. That's what loyalty is. One person gets hurt, and the whole system learns to stop it next time. Step 2 was the part they didn't see coming. I called the old insurer and requested contract termination, immediate. They tried to slow walk it. There are procedures. There are timelines. I said, I'll follow every procedure, and I'll make it expensive. Then I pulled every single policy across every business, restaurants, resort, taxis, cleaners, security. And while their rep was still typing, I called my family. Not for money, for reach. My cousin runs a shipping firm. My aunt sits on 2 non-profit boards. A childhood friend married into a group that owns half the commercial property in our county. I didn't need them to fight my battle. I just needed them to listen to one short story. They denied my employees surgery, retroactively, then called us low end. I didn't ask. I let silence do the work. Then I heard it, one by one. Send me their name. Who's your new provider? Done. Within 48 hours, my phone became a switchboard. Friends asking for the broker contact. Business owners asking if my story was real. I told them, I have the denial letter. That was enough. People love pretending they're rational until they see cruelty with a corporate logo stamped on it. The old insurer finally called me back. Different tone now, softer. They offered to reopen the claim. I laughed, once. Not because it was funny, because it was late. You told me to find another provider, I said. I did. They offered discounts, premium adjustments. I said, you already showed me your real policy. It's not written on paper. It's written on who you respect. There was a pause. Then the rep tried to guilt me. This could impact local jobs. I said, it didn't stop you from impacting Marissa's life. Click. At this point, you might think the revenge was just switch providers. No, that's just walking away. Revenge is making sure they remember why you walked. So I did something I almost never do. I showed my face. I attended 2 chamber events in 1 week. I shook hands. I listened. I didn't rant. I told the story the same way every time. Short, factual, calm. And I watched the expressions change when I got to the retroactive part. When I got to low end. Because business owners don't fear competition. They fear arbitrary rules. If an insurer can rewrite coverage backward, then no one is safe. And once that idea takes hold in a community, it spreads like a rumor and hits like a storm. By the end of the week, Harbor Shield's broker asked me, "What did you do?" I said, "Nothing. I just told the truth in public." That's the thing about arrogance. It hates daylight. Marissa came back to work 2 weeks later. Still pale, still healing, but standing tall. She tried to hand me an envelope. I already knew what it was. A check. "I can start paying you back," she said, voice firm like she'd practiced it. I slid the envelope back. "No," she frowned. "You can't just..." I cut in gently. "Yes, I can. I'm your employer. This was my responsibility." She stared at me, then said, "Then let me do something." So I gave her something real. I promoted her officially. Regional operations. More authority, more pay, less physical strain. Her eyes widened like I'd offered her a new life. I said, "Loyalty goes both ways, Marissa. You carried us for years. Now we carry you." She looked away fast, blinking hard. That's the moment I knew. This wasn't just revenge. It was a promise, written into the way we ran things. Meanwhile, the old insurer started bleeding accounts. At first it was the small ones, people like me, the ones they assumed couldn't hurt them. Then mid-sized companies began moving, then a couple of big names. That's when they panicked. I got an email from the same VP I met at headquarters. It was polite, too polite. He wanted a conversation. He wanted to repair the relationship. I read it twice, then forwarded it to my lawyer friend with one note. "Keep this." Not because I planned to sue, because I wanted a record of their fear. Fear makes people honest. And sure enough, when he finally called, his voice had changed. No more superiority. He asked, "What would it take to make this right?" I said, "You can't make it right. You can only stop doing it to the next person." He said, "We can review your claims." I replied, "You already reviewed it. You just didn't respect us." Then I ended the call like I ended the contract. Clean. Here's the part people don't understand about businesses like theirs. They're not built on customers. They're built on confidence. If enough people lose confidence at once, the whole machine shakes. And their machine was already fragile: bloated leadership, expensive offices, and a habit of treating customers like they were lucky to be there. They blamed market conditions. They blamed claim trends. They didn't blame themselves. But numbers don't care about ego. A month later, one of my friends, who owns a mid-size hotel chain, called me laughing. "You know they're offering insane discounts to keep us?" I said, "Take the discount if you want." He replied, "Nope, I don't pay bullies." That sentence hit me harder than any courtroom threat, because it meant the story was bigger than me now. It wasn't my revenge anymore. It was community memory. Then COVID hit, and if you've ever watched a weak company during a crisis, you know what happens. The cracks don't appear, they widen. Hospitals filled, claims spiked, markets shook, and the old insurer, already bleeding accounts, started barely floating. I didn't celebrate. I'm not that kind of monster. But I also didn't feel bad, because this wasn't bad luck. This was the bill coming due. Their arrogance had a cost, and the world had stopped offering grace. One afternoon, I got a message from a broker. They're headed for receivership. Receivership, a corporate word that means, in plain language, we can't handle what we promised. I sat at my desk and thought about Marissa's denial letter. Then I whispered, "Good." Not because I wanted them destroyed, but because I wanted the lesson to be permanent. Around that time, Harbor Shield, my new insurer, called me. They wanted to discuss expansion. That's how it started. Not as a revenge plot, but as a business opportunity. They were growing. They were hungry. They had the capital to absorb new accounts. And they had something the old insurer didn't: a culture of not insulting customers. A week later, rumors hit the industry. Harbor Shield was in talks to acquire distressed competitors, including them. I stared at the email like the universe had a sense of humor, because the old insurer's biggest rival, the one they said I should go find, was now in position to buy them like a damaged asset. And suddenly, my switch provider's decision turned into a domino line. Not one domino, an entire table. I didn't push every piece, but I definitely tipped the first one, and I wasn't done watching. Acquisition finally happened. It wasn't flashy. No fireworks. No headlines in my small-town paper. Just a quiet industry press release and a lot of private panic behind closed doors. But I heard what mattered. The executives, the ones who loved the words "low end," were out. Fired. Forced to resign. Removed like a stain. The lower employees stayed. The call center reps. The people reading scripts. The ones trapped inside a culture they didn't create. That part mattered to me, because revenge shouldn't be random. It should be precise. The arrogant decision-makers lost their jobs. The everyday workers kept theirs. One of my contacts inside the industry texted me. "They're cleaning house." I typed back, "Good." Then I thought about Marissa again. She'd never even met those executives. She was just the person they decided didn't matter. And now, because of her, their whole empire had been rewritten. That's the most dangerous kind of revenge. The kind that looks like consequences. You'd think the story ends there. Execs fired, company swallowed, lesson learned. But my brain doesn't work like that. I don't like loose ends. And the old insurer still had one piece of real estate in my town, their local office building. A squat, ugly thing with tinted windows, sitting on a corner like it owned the street. During the fallout, the building went up for sale. Quietly. I heard about it through, of course, family. My aunt called and said, "Do you know they're selling that property?" I looked at the listing. Price dropped twice. Then I made an offer. Not to gloat, to finish the sentence. When the deal closed, I walked through the empty halls. The carpets were worn. The air smelled like stale coffee and old power. I stood in the main lobby and imagined that VP shrugging at me. Then I said out loud to nobody, "Low end, huh?" And I smiled. Small, private, final. I renovated it, not into a trophy, into something useful. Office suites for small businesses, startups, accountants, therapists, people who actually help the community function. I installed better lighting, clean bathrooms, real security. Then I named the place something boring on purpose, because the point wasn't a monument. The point was, their arrogance became my asset. Marissa visited once, months later. She walked through the lobby and looked around. "This is theirs," she said softly. "It was," I replied. She ran her fingers along a new wall plaque. "My building rules, plain and fair." She asked, "Did you do all this because of me?" I paused, because the true answer was heavier than yes. "I did it," I said, "because companies like that don't stop unless it costs them." She swallowed. "I still feel guilty." I looked her dead in the eye. "Don't," I said. "You were the storm. They were the rot." Years later, people still ask me why I didn't just let it go. Because letting it go is a luxury for people who never get crushed by policy language. Marissa was the kind of employee every business owner prays for. Steady, loyal, responsible. And the insurer still tried to bankrupt her with a retroactive trick. That's not a mistake. That's a model. And models don't change until the math changes. The truth is, I didn't invent revenge. I used the same tools they used. Contracts, leverage, networks. But I used them in the opposite direction. They tried to use size to bully. I used size to protect. That's the difference between power and abuse. One builds a roof. The other kicks people out in the rain. I remember the denial letter sometimes. That smug, not covered, stamped like a verdict. And I think, they weren't denying a surgery. They were denying a person. But here's the part I rarely say out loud. I didn't do this because I'm noble. I did it because I know what it feels like to be underestimated. My whole life, people looked at me and assumed small, too quiet, too plain, too soft. Even in my own family, I was the black sheep, the one they expected to fail. The difference is, my family still gave me a financial river to float on. Allowances, a trust, connections. I never had to wonder if I'd eat. Marissa did. So when that insurer called her low end, it wasn't just an insult, it was a threat, a warning. Know your place, pay up, shut up. And if I let that slide, what does that say about me? That I'm only generous when it's cheap? No. If I'm going to have power, earned or inherited. Sometimes I replay that moment in the conference room when the VP shrugged, because that shrug told me everything about their culture. They were used to customers folding, used to people being too tired to fight. They bet on exhaustion, and usually they won. But this time, their opponent wasn't just one angry employer. It was a network they couldn't see. Friends, family, business partners. Not a mob, worse. A quiet line of decision makers who could move millions of dollars with one phone call. And the funniest part? They could have stopped the bleeding at any moment by doing one simple thing. Treating people like people. Paying what they promised, apologizing without ego. But arrogance is addictive. It convinces you you're untouchable, right up until your building goes up for sale, and someone you dismissed buys it. That's when arrogance finally learns the truth. It was never untouchable. It was just unchallenged. Marissa eventually told me something that stuck with me. We were closing up one night, lights dim, chairs up, the smell of sanitizer in the air. She said, "When they denied it, I thought, maybe I deserved it." I froze. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged, small, ashamed. "Because that's how they talk, like you're lucky they even answer." That's what corporate cruelty does. It trains decent people to feel guilty for needing help. I said, "Listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. You got sick. You got treated. That's life." She nodded, but her eyes stayed wet. Then she said, "I'll be loyal to you forever." I hated that sentence. Not because I didn't want her loyalty, but because no one should have to swear forever just because they weren't abandoned. So I corrected her. "Be loyal to yourself," I said, "and if I ever stop protecting my people, leave." She stared like I'd slapped her with sanity. Then she whispered, "Okay," and I believed her. A year after the acquisition, someone from Harbor Shield invited me to a small dinner. Just local accounts, casual, no suits. They thanked me for bringing business. I corrected them. "I didn't bring you business," I said. "You earned it by not playing games." They nodded, and one executive said, "You'd be surprised how rare that is." I wasn't surprised. I was tired. Because the more you learn, the more you realize the world runs on two types of people. The ones who treat rules as a contract, and the ones who treat rules as a trap. That old insurer was a trap company. They made money not by covering risk, but by dodging it. And for years, nobody forced them to pay the price. Until one employee got hurt and a low-end client refused to swallow it. That's what scares bullies most. Not rage, but refusal. Because refusal spreads, and once it does, their whole business model collapses like wet paper. Sometimes, late at night, I drive past the building I bought. Not often, just when I'm thinking too much. The windows glow warm now, tenants inside, people working, building something, and I wonder what the old executives are doing. Are they still convinced they were right? Do they tell the story as an unreasonable client ruined us? Or do they finally admit they gambled with people's lives and lost? I don't know. What I do know is this: Marissa is still with us. She's healthier, stronger, promoted again. She runs operations like a general, calm, decisive, protective. And every time a new employee gets hired, she's the first one to say, "If you're sick, you go home. If you need help, you ask." We don't play hero here. That's the real win. Not the building, not the acquisition, but a culture that refuses to treat suffering as an inconvenience. If you want the clean moral, here it is. Don't confuse kindness with weakness. That insurer saw my plain clothes and assumed I had no leverage. They saw my employee's surgery and assumed she had no options. They were wrong, twice. Because leverage isn't just money, it's reputation, it's relationships. It's the story people tell about you when you're not in the room. They built a story where they were untouchable. I built a story where they were exposed. And when those two stories collided, theirs didn't survive contact with reality. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to threaten. I just needed to do what they told me to do, leave, and take everyone with me. That's the part corporate bullies never plan for. They assume the customer is alone, but customers talk. And when they talk, the bullies shrink. The irony is, if that insurer had just paid the claim, I would have stayed. I would have renewed like everyone else. I would have never looked behind the curtain. But they couldn't help themselves. They needed to feel bigger than someone. So they picked the wrong target. Not because I'm special, but because I'm connected in ways that don't show up on a balance sheet. That's the mistake arrogant institutions make. They rank humans like invoices. They forget a person can be small today and still carry a match. Marissa never asked me to burn anything for her. She just wanted to survive. But survival has a strange way of rewriting power. It forces people like me to decide what we stand for. And once you decide, you don't undecide. You just build a world where it can't happen again. That was my real revenge, making the system safer, and letting the bully lose everything without me ever touching a weapon. One afternoon, months after everything settled, I found the old denial letter in a file drawer. I'd kept it like you keep a splinter, proof something sharp got under your skin. Marissa walked in, saw it, and went quiet. "Throw it away," she said. I looked at her. "Why?" "Because it makes me feel small," she admitted. I nodded. Then I tore it in half. Slow. Not for drama, for closure. I dropped it into the trash and said, "You were never small." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a year. Then she said, "Do you think they'll do it again to someone else?" I didn't lie. "Some company will," I said. "Somewhere." She frowned. "Then what's the point?" I smiled, cold, honest. "The point is," I said, "next time, someone will remember this story, and they won't feel alone." That's how power shifts, not by one big hero moment, by 1,000 people refusing to be treated like trash. If you're wondering what happened to me after all this, I kept building. Not bigger, better. I tightened policies, trained managers, put accountability into writing. Because loyalty isn't a vibe. It's a system. A system that protects people when life hits hard. And Marissa? She became the standard. When managers complain about sick leave, she shuts it down. When someone tries to save money by cutting benefits, she looks at them like they've insulted her family. Because in a way, they have. Our staff stopped seeing the company as a place that would replace them if they broke. They started seeing it as a place that would hold them up. That changes how people work. They don't just show up, they invest. And when people invest, businesses last. So yeah, the insurer lost a war. But the real victory was quieter. A loyal team that learned loyalty isn't begging. It's mutual protection. Every now and then, someone new asks me, "How did you get the money to do all that?" Like revenge requires a vault and a villain laugh. The truth is boring. I had a head start. Family allowances when I was younger, a small inheritance from my grandmother, a long-term fund set up when I was a baby, money gifts that were less about love and more about protecting the family image. Then I invested, took risks, built businesses along the coast, and I used the strongest currency my family ever handed me, their name, their network. Doors that open because people recognize what you're attached to. I don't pretend that isn't real. I just refuse to waste it. Because if privilege exists, and it does, then it should come with a job. Protect people who don't have it. That insurer thought my plain life meant I couldn't move markets. They confused humility with helplessness, and that mistake cost them everything. I never posted about it, never made a speech online, never tried to go viral. Because real power doesn't need an audience, it needs results. And the result was simple. Marissa didn't drown in debt. My staff got better coverage. A bully company lost leadership, lost reputation, and got swallowed by a competitor. And their local building, once a symbol of their arrogance, became a place where small businesses could grow. That's my kind of revenge. Not blood, not drama. Just consequences, arranged carefully. Like setting dominoes in a line and letting gravity do what gravity does. If you want a final image, here it is. That VP, somewhere, opening a news alert about his own company's collapse, and realizing the low-end client didn't scream. He just moved. And the whole world moved with him. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, "I could never do that," you're partly right. Most people don't have my resources. But you don't need my resources to learn the real lesson. You need clarity. You need documentation. You need community. Bullies love isolation. They love making you feel like you're the only one, the crazy one, the small one. The moment you connect your story to other people's stories, the bully loses oxygen. That's what happened here. I didn't defeat them alone. I just refused to be quiet, and I refused to be isolated. And the people around me, people who were tired of being treated like numbers, did the rest. So maybe you can't buy a building, but you can tell the truth. You can walk away. You can take your business elsewhere. And if enough people do that, even the biggest glass tower learns what gravity feels like. Marissa asked me once, "Do you ever regret it?" I said, "Regret what?" "Starting the chain," she replied. I leaned back and thought for a second. Regret is a funny word. It assumes the alternative was clean. The alternative was letting a company rewrite reality and punish people for being human. So no, I didn't regret it. I regretted that it was necessary. I regretted that an adult in a suit could look at a surgery bill and feel nothing. But regret the chain? No, because the chain proves something important. A person doesn't have to be loud to be dangerous. Sometimes danger looks like a calm man reading a contract, then making 10 phone calls. Sometimes danger looks like a community quietly choosing a different provider. Sometimes danger looks like a bully waking up one day and realizing the world no longer believes them. That's the kind of danger I can live with. If I could go back to that first phone call, the rep reading the script, I'd still do it the same way. Calm, polite, precise. Because the goal was never to win an argument. The goal was to reveal who they were. And they revealed it. Every step. Retroactive coverage, selective notification, semantics, low end. They practically handed me the blueprint of their own downfall. All I did was take it seriously. That's what people miss. Revenge isn't always rage. Sometimes revenge is attention. It's noticing the pattern and deciding you won't be a victim inside it. And if you're a business owner listening to this, here's your warning. Your policies are promises. If you break them, you don't just lose clients, you lose the story. And once you lose the story, someone else gets to write your ending. So here's where we end. Not with a punch, with a door, open. Marissa walks into the office each morning, coffee in hand, keys jingling, alive. My staff clock in knowing they're protected, and a building that used to belong to a bully now belongs to the people who build things. That's how I measure success now, not by how high you climb, but by how many people you refuse to let fall. The old insurer called us low end. In the end, they found out what low end really means. The bottom of the domino line, where everything collapses if you kick it wrong. And the funniest part? They told me to find another provider. So I did, and I took their whole world with me.